Imagine this scene. You're in a high-end casino. The air is thick with, I don't know, tension, the smell of ozone, and then just chaos erupts.
Right in the middle of the floor.
In the middle of the floor, you've got this man, he's severely overweight, and he's wearing nothing but a ridiculously tight red Speedo.
Which is mental image in itself.
It really is. And he's taking baton strikes, 1, 2, 3, right to the head and body, and it's like he doesn't even feel the pain.
He doesn't even register it.
Nothing. Pepper spray hits him full in the face, completely useless. The police deploy an air taser, and you can see the electrical charge coursing through his body, and still, he just keeps shambling forward.
Possessed by something, some kind of inhuman resilience.
And then the scene just turns monstrous. He grabs one of the security guards, a giant of a man, 6'5", 260 pounds, and with this raw, terrifying burst of strength, he uses that poor officer,
Like a club.
like a human club, to smash through his second guard before he just collapses, inexplicably face down. The temporary super strength just drains out of him in an instant.
And that single violent incident, what our sources call the Speedo Man rampage, that's really the entry point into the whole crisis we're exploring today.
Right.
It's the immediate, bizarre consequence of a threat that has nothing to do with conventional terrorism or, warfare. Our source material maps out this fictional but threateningly plausible scenario.
It feels very real.
It does. It's about a high-tech government security operation, net force, that finds itself just wrestling with a potent, illegal designer drug.
Yeah.
And it's known only by its frightening street name, Thor's Hammer.
So this is our deep dive into the hunt for that substance. And our sources give us this really detailed, almost forensic account of the operation, which is led by Commander Alex Michaels and General John Howard.
A great team.
And our mission today is to explore how this elite agency is forced to look so far beyond simple drug tracking. They have to delve deep into cutting-edge digital intelligence. They have to crack codes hidden in, of all things, Norse mythology.
Which is just a fascinating detail.
It's incredible. And then they're unearthing high school debate club records from 20 years ago, and maybe most disturbingly, navigating this stunning web of interagency corruption at the very, very highest levels of federal law enforcement.
Yeah, the complexity of this case is immense. And you have to understand, we're not just tracking a chemist here. We're tracking a genius who weaponized chemistry, really for spite and for profit.
So we have to understand the physical fallout of a drug that creates these temporary superhuman soldiers and the personal motivations of absolutely everyone involved.
Everyone. The corrupted agents, the brilliant creator, and the investigators who have to fight this, this chemical power with nothing but skill and ethical discipline.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the core threat itself. What exactly is Thor's hammer, and what on earth does it do to the human body?
Well, the name itself.
Thor's hammer.
Yeah. It suggests overwhelming power, and the reports certainly back that up. When you look across all the incident reports, the visible effects of this drug on a user after they've taken that one large, distinctive purple capsule are...
Well, they're terrifying.
So what are we talking about specifically?
We're talking about immediate, uncontrollable aggression. And that's coupled with a truly massive physical enhancement. This isn't just like a rush of adrenaline.
Yeah.
This is temporary, quantifiable, superhuman strength. I mean, users have been documented flipping compact cars with their bare hands.
Nosebleed cars.
Whipping cars, ripping ATM machines right out of their concrete mountings, not just breaking into them, but actually tearing them free. And in personal combat, twisting grown men, even trained security personnel up like soft pretzels.
That level of brute force, it just goes beyond even the most powerful known steroids or stimulants. I mean, that's something else entirely. It is, and it's coupled with extreme speed and endurance. The sources detail this agonizing recovery phase, which implies that the compound forces the body to burn through every single available resource, but that initial effect is just overwhelming.
And there's another strange detail in there too, right?
There is. Interestingly, there's also a noted increase in sexual potency during the initial rush, which, while maybe a strange detail to focus on, it confirms that the drug is overriding fundamental biological limits. It's just flooding the system with chemical energy.
There's an anecdote about that in the sources.
There is. It suggested that a single night running with Thor was worth a week's recovery for someone who was already in good physical condition. That just speaks volumes about the brutal taxing costs this compound exacts on the user's entire physiology.
But the physical strength alone isn't really the most dangerous part, is it? It's the psychological state it creates.
That's the critical component, yes. The physical power is merely the tool. The psychological state is the engine of all the destruction. The user is plunged into this delusional state where they genuinely believe they are faster than a speeding bullet and more powerful than a locomotive.
They become their own superhero.
Exactly. They become entirely devoid of fear, of consequence, of pain.
And we saw that with the Speedo Man, right? He just ignored multiple taser shocks.
Precisely. This belief in invincibility leads to catastrophic risk-taking. We see it in the detailed account of the gym trashing incident later in the source material, where the user, a man named Tad Bershaw, was so infused with this sense of godlike power that he felt capable of striking people down at a whim, or even, as the sources state, changing the very configuration of the planet with a mere wave of his hand.
It's chemical hubris.
On steroids, literally.
So if the drug is this demonstrably destructive, I mean, it's leading to fatalities, massive property damage, it seems really counterintuitive that it's still on the streets and not immediately outlawed. Why did the government agencies, specifically the DEA, hit a legal wall with this?
And this is where the complexities of, designer chemistry meet the real limitations of federal drug scheduling. The problem lay in the lack of chemical identification. The authorities simply could not get their hands on enough of the drug, that distinctive large purple capsule, to properly analyze its exact molecular structure.
Okay, but what about the Analog Act? I mean, isn't that designed precisely to cover substances that are chemically similar to illegal ones?
You'd think so, but they couldn't apply the analog provisions effectively without knowing the core structure of the original. The drug's creator, this guy Bobby Drayne, he was brilliant enough to design a compound that was either structurally unique or so complex that the trace amounts they seized at various crime scenes just weren't sufficient for a complete breakdown.
So without that precise chemical signature?
The DEA couldn't add it to the Controlled Substances Act. They were stuck.
So legally, they were stuck with the complete absurdity of trying to outlaw the container, not the content.
Precisely. Commander Michaels and his team had to contend with the legal difference between two very important concepts. First, you have malum prohibitum.
Which means?
Something that is bad merely because the law says it's illegal. Think of running a stop sign or a traffic ticket. It's an act that's forbidden by a statute.
And the second one is malum in se.
Malum in se means bad in itself. This is an inherently wrong, immoral, or evil act. Things like murder, rape, or theft.
Right.
So the destruction caused by Thor's hammer is definitely bad in itself, but the possession of the specific chemical compound couldn't be prosecuted because that chemical wasn't legally defined as a controlled substance?
So they could confiscate the big purple capsules, but they couldn't prosecute the dealer effectively because they didn't know what they were dealing with.
Exactly. The DEA essentially had to go to the Attorney General and ask if they could make an unidentifiable purple object illegal temporarily, which, in a court of law, would be laughed out the door.
It would be dismissed immediately.
Which is why NetForce's mission became less about a police action and more about clandestine intelligence operation. They needed the formula and the supply chain, not just the user on the street.
And the chemist, Drayne, he also employed another layer of protection by being very careful about who he sold to.
He controlled his client base, yes. And that speaks to the high-end distribution network.
The victim analysis was very telling.
It was revealing, yeah. Every single confirmed death resulting from ingesting Thor's hammer involved individuals who were wealthy, making at least $250,000 a year, with many earning millions. This isn't a drug designed for mass-market street sales. It's bespoke.
And this high-end network kept the user profile limited.
It did. And that minimized the public and political pressure that would have quickly forced an emergency legal ruling if it had been, say, a fentanyl analog or some cheap street narcotic causing deaths in lower-income areas.
So this is where NetForce, and especially General Howard's military arm, becomes so crucial. They aren't just looking at this as a legal problem. They're seeing it as a potential strategic military threat.
You absolutely have to, because a chemical agent that grants temporary superhuman strength and completely eliminates the self-preservation instinct is, for certain organizations, the ultimate enhancement.
And we have historical context for this, of course.
We do. Armies have experimented with performance-enhancing drugs for centuries. Most notably the Nazis, with various forms of speed and stimulants to increase soldier performance and reduce fatigue.
But this is an order of magnitude more powerful than anything historical.
Exactly. The very existence of Thor's hammer proves the feasibility of creating chemically induced super soldiers. General Howard, the head of Netforce's military division, was very clear about the application. He said if such a compound was safe, legal, and gave his soldiers an advantage in the field, he would use it immediately to bring more of his people back alive.
The moral imperative of protecting his own outweighed the ethical quandary of chemical enhancement for him.
It did.
And if Howard, who operates under U.S. ethical constraints, is interested, you can guarantee every rival intelligence service is just salivating over this formula.
That's the core concern right there. Even if the current hammer formulation is unstable and deadly, it demonstrates a massive technological breakthrough. This raises critical questions about ethical testing and application by armies or intelligence agencies with what the sources refer to as fewer scruples.
A new form of chemical warfare.
That's what it is, creating individual shock troops with temporary godlike power. And that's precisely why agencies like the NSA, who are normally focused on signal intelligence, become so intensely interested in what they view as field operations enhancement potential. They don't want to track the drug. They want the formula itself.
It's a terrifying application of chemistry. Now, before we transition to the destructive genius who actually created the hammer, we have to pause and look at a piece of completely unrelated cutting-edge military technology that's mentioned in the sources. One that provides this powerful, almost spiritual contrast to the destruction of Thor's hammer.
Ah, yes, the ROCC-SRM.
The ROCC-SRM.
The remote-operated, computer-controlled surgical robotic module. It is a remarkable piece of hardware, and it's dedicated entirely to life, not destruction. It really stands as the purest opposite of Thor's hammer.
So tell us about its function. What exactly does it do, and why is that level of precision so important?
Well, the system allows a world-class surgeon to be up to 1,000 miles away from the operating table. The unit itself gets deployed in a remote field hospital, and it's staffed by physician assistants and nurses.
But the surgeon is safe.
The surgeon sits at a console in a safe location, and they put their fingers into these specialized rings that control the Waldos, which are the robotic surgical tools working on the patient's body.
So if you can imagine the surgeon's hands moving delicately, but 1,000 miles away, these robotic tools are mimicking those movements with hyper-precision.
Exactly. And the control system is incredibly complex. It requires complete mastery not just of the hands, but also the feet. The surgeon operates a set of specialized foot pedals. The left foot runs the endoscope. That's the light source and camera that let the surgeon see what they're doing inside the body.
And the right foot.
The right foot controls clamps, suction, and other auxiliary tools. It requires total body coordination. It's like playing an instrument.
And the level of control is it's almost unbelievable. We're talking about precision at a nearly microscopic level.
The sources emphasize this by giving a really concrete example. A surgeon who is proficient with the ROCC SRM can pick up number 6 BBs, tiny steel pellets usually used in air rifles, without dropping a single one.
Wow.
That's the standard for acceptable precision. Its confirmed successful uses include performing delicate blood vessel grafts, repairing bowels damaged by shrapnel, and even stitching up torn hearts, all from a distance.
The contrast is just phenomenal. On one hand, you have a genius dedicating years to creating a drug that forces a man to rip an ATM out of a wall, driven by this primal aggression.
Right.
And on the other, you have a team of geniuses creating a system that can pick up a pellet the size of a pinhead from 1,000 miles away, purely to save a life under impossible circumstances.
That distinction really defines the ethical battlefield that Netforce is operating on. It forces us to ask, what is the ultimate goal of advanced knowledge? Is it to magnify the destruction the human body is capable of, or is it to enhance our ability to heal and protect? Drayne, the chemist, he chose the former.
Let's meet him. The man behind Thor's hammer is Bobby Drayne, and his history reads less like a criminal mastermind and more like a brilliant case of, pathological spite.
Drayne's intellectual capacity is unquestionable. I mean, he is a certified genius with an IQ estimated between 160 and 170. Physically, he projects this relaxed, almost dismissive persona, the tanned surfer look, still muscular enough for a gymnast. But this casual exterior masks extreme operational security and, more importantly, a profound, decades-old hatred for his father.
And his father, Robert Drayne, defined everything Bobby hated about authority.
He really did. Rickover was a retired FBI special agent in charge, described in the files as being relentlessly straight-laced and unwavering in his commitment to duty and lawfulness. Bobby's entire adult life, his whole criminal enterprise, was meticulously engineered as an act of defiance against his father.
He had an inspiration for this.
He was obsessed with emulating the notorious 1960s drug guru Owsley Stanley, who famously began making massive quantities of LSD when it was still an illegal gray area. Bobby wanted to be the Owsley of his generation, the outlaw chemist.
So the creation of this superdrug wasn't just about the money. It was a kind of performance art aimed directly at his father. He built an entire legitimate-seeming life just to fool the retired FBI agent.
That's the key psychological driver. He needed to prove he was smarter than the system his father represented, but still successful by his father's own metrics. So he created Polychem Products, a shell corporation incorporated in Delaware, claiming to produce plastic polymers for industrial waste containers.
And he was careful with the numbers.
Oh, scrupulously. He paid taxes on a salary that was just slightly higher than his father's final FBI pay grade. He believed this legitimate, well-taxed facade would keep the federal government, especially IRS, off his back, thinking they didn't care what you did as long as you paid taxes.
That level of calculated deceit is just extraordinary, and his physical security for the actual production was equally elaborate, designed to defeat any conventional surveillance.
Well, his laboratory wasn't a fixed location, which immediately complicates any search warrant or stakeout operation. It was mobile, a large RV, constantly traveling along the edge of the Mojave Desert.
And it was disguised.
Intentionally disguised, yes. It was driven by an old retired couple with seemingly innocent Missouri license plates. He called them Ma and Pa Yeehaw.
But the yeehaws were anything but innocent, right?
No, they were hardened, professional criminals, gun-toting individuals who Drayne knew would go down with guns blasting before they let themselves be taken alive. This was his first layer of defense.
And he himself lived elsewhere.
Drayne himself leased a Malibu house under minimal surveillance risk, never keeping large amounts of product on hand. He operated under the assumption that federal agents would be reluctant to kick in the door of a rich house associated with Hollywood actors, believing they were dealing with the lowest risk customers possible.
Okay, now we need to discuss his indispensable partner, Tad Bershaw, the enforcer and, I guess, the chief test subject. This is such a strange dynamic. The controlled genius paired with this chemically dependent wreck.
Tad is Drayne's full-time doper, and the sources paint a very clear picture of his physical state. He's reedy, he's frail, with a history of serious respiratory issues like chronic bronchitis, asthma, and even tuberculosis. Yet, he is hopelessly addicted to the sheer power of the hammer.
Drayne notes that he uses it more than anyone.
He does. He says that Tad swings the hammer more than anybody alive.
So he is the ultimate living proof of the drug's power to overcome physical limits. But he pays an agonizing price for every single high.
Oh, he does. To survive the brutal post-hammer recovery phases, the body breakdown and the aches, Tad carries what the sources call a portable pharmacy. He consumes Demerol, morphine, and heroin just to manage the chemical hangover and repair the physical damage he incurs during his rampages.
So Drayne keeps him alive with chemicals, so that Tad can stay addicted to the chemical that gives him power. It's a vicious, self-sustaining circle.
And it really speaks to the isolation of Drayne's life. He saw Tad as his only real friend, noting that when you deal illegal compounds, you don't form deep relationships with honest people. Tad is loyal because the drug is his life. It gives him the power and the thrill he lacked as a perpetually frail man.
And Drayne knows it's a death sentence.
He knows the drug will inevitably kill Tad, but for now, it makes him the only person capable of being Drayne's muscle.
So while Drayne is operating his chemical laboratory on wheels, Commander Michaels, back in Washington, D.C., is dealing with a very different kind of high-stakes pressure, the stress of an expectant father trying to maintain some kind of equilibrium on the home front.
And this contrast between the extreme violence of the job and the fragility of the personal stakes is just so crucial to the whole story. Michaels' wife, Toni, is 5 months pregnant, and her doctor, Dr. Florid, had issued very strict orders.
What was the issue?
She had experienced some early bleeding, and her blood pressure was slightly elevated, 130/86, up from her athletic normal of 20/74.
And for Toni, who's a lifelong practitioner of martial arts, that forced inactivity must have been unbearable.
It was. It was causing her intense cabin fever and emotional volatility, crying unexpectedly, which the doctor assured Michaels was just normal pregnancy hormones. But Toni is a master of the Indonesian martial art pencak silat.
Specifically 2 styles.
Yes, the Bhakti Negara and the more complex, grounded Sarak styles. Dr. Florid explicitly forbade any strenuous activity. No heavy lifting, no jogging, no deep knee bends, and critically, no practice of her juris, the structured, complex training movements she relies on. He warned Michaels that continued high blood pressure or strenuous activity risked a preterm birth.
So she had to redirect all of that intense physical and mental energy somewhere else. And that leads us to her new and incredibly intricate hobby, microscrimshaw.
It's a hobby that requires the precision and patience of a surgeon or a warrior. Scrimshaw is traditionally the art of engraving images onto materials like ivory or bone. Toni took up microscrimshaw, working on pieces of fossilized ivory, sometimes sourced from old piano keys or even billiard balls.
The dedication required for this is just immense, that this isn't just sketching something out.
Not at all. She was inspired by a piece she saw on her honeymoon, a tiny, detailed black and white rendering of a naked woman floating in a lotus position. To replicate this, she had to use a process called stippling.
Stippling.
She takes a very fine-pointed instrument, essentially a sewing needle, and taps thousands of tiny microscopic dots into the polished ivory surface.
She is literally creating the image dot by tiny dot.
And the coloring is achieved afterward. She rubs oil paint. The sources mention lamp black oil paint, which creates a deep black pigment over the surface. When she wipes the excess clean, the paint sinks into those thousands of stippled dots, making the image visible. The work is so minute that it requires powerful magnification.
And Michaels' active support here really highlights his commitment to his expectant father duties, despite this high-stress investigation he's running.
It does. He supported her by bringing home a specific tool from the Columbia Scientific Shop, a stereoscope. This is a high-quality microscope designed for viewing objects in 3 dimensions, and it provides the foot of clearance she needed to manipulate the needle and the ivory comfortably.
It's an act of love.
It is. It's an incredibly quiet, non-violent application of technical precision, and his way of helping his highly disciplined, physically powerful wife manage her enforced, volatile fragility.
Home front, then, is a place of forced restraint, while the professional life is one of unrestrained, chemically fueled violence. Let's move now to the digital realm, because that's where the investigation finally broke wide open.
And the key to cracking the case wasn't a stakeout or an informant. It was the genius of NetForce's computer expert, Jay Gridley.
But Jay was dealing with his own internal philosophical conflict at the time, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. Jay's life had been significantly influenced by his guru and girlfriend, Saji, who is a Tibetan Buddhist master. Jay is usually hunting big sharks, massive digital threats like complex viruses, multinational fraud, state-sponsored espionage. But Saji had him attempting to integrate the principles of Taoism and Buddhism, specifically through intense meditation.
Trying to quiet his mind.
He was trying to quiet what he called the howler monkeys in his mind.
So he's trying to find Zen in the middle of a massive cybersecurity hunt.
And he found, ironically, that constant meditation made him too mellow. It actually dulled the necessary intellectual sharpness and restlessness he needed to spot the infinitesimal, non-obvious details that break a case. His process for finding the hammer source was the ultimate example of controlled intellectual restlessness.
He started with conventional keywords, but the winning hit was incredibly simple, wasn't it?
Incredibly simple. He was sifting through the data of one wealthy drug customer, looking at transactions conducted on public computers under phony names. He deployed search bots looking for dozens of keywords: Thor, hammer, designer drug, things like that. But the search term that yielded the key clue was just the word purple.
The physical attribute of the capsule itself, used as a casual descriptor.
It led him to an email referencing a purple thingy and, critically, 2 code names: Friday Girl and Wednesday.
And this is where Jay's genius comes in. The inferential leap he made, connecting a casual digital alias to ancient mythology.
It was brilliant. He realized the names were the parents of the drug's namesake.
Right.
Friday is named for the Norse goddess Frigga, who was Odin's wife. Wednesday comes from Woden, the Anglo-Saxon derivation of Odin. Frigga and Odin are the mythological parents of Thor. The drug's name, the unique capsule color, and the dealer's online alias were all connected in the subtle intellectual code designed by Drayne to amuse himself.
A code only someone operating at Jay's IQ level could spot and exploit.
Exactly. And that connection was the biggest break of the entire investigation.
But as Jay began pulling that thread, he didn't just find the chemist. He found something far, far more disturbing. A structured, deep-seated corporate conspiracy that had permeated federal law enforcement.
And this is where the story shifts from, a simple drug interdiction to a story of intelligence betrayal. Jay focused on the two federal agents who were applying the most pressure to Michaels's investigation, the ones who were constantly attempting to divert or shut it down.
DEA agent Brett Lee and NSA agent Zachary George.
That's them. There was massive professional friction between them. Lee was a Georgia Tech guy, George was NYU. They seemed to hate each other, yet they always operated in sync.
And the immediate lack of a professional connection was the clue, right? It forced Jay to look outside their adult careers.
It did. He went back 20 years, and the results were stunning. They had first met at a high school debate conference in Washington, D.C. when they were just teenagers. The topic George had argued the affirmative on was incredibly provocative.
This is unbelievable.
It was. Resolved imminent threats to national security should supersede habeas corpus.
So the future NSA and DEA agents were bonding over the idea that government power should override individual rights as teenagers.
And Lee, who had traveled all the way from Georgia Tech for this conference, was in the audience, watching George's presentation with the intensity of a believer hearing a sermon. This moment, 2 decades prior, was the ideological foundation for their partnership.
But Jay found the practical connection was even more structured than that.
He did. Their ex-wives were the link.
They were roommates.
Yes. Lee's ex-wife, Lynn Davis, who was a lawyer and teacher, and George's ex-wife, Jackie McNally, a stockbroker, had been law school roommates. This wasn't a casual connection. This implied a planned, organized effort to bring these two high-level federal agents together for a specific purpose.
And the ultimate purpose wasn't even to sell the hammer and make a profit. It was to suppress a rival.
It was a pharmaceutical shadow war. A rival company had its own similar but inferior drug nearing market approval. If Drayne's superior Thor's hammer formula hit the market, it would instantly undercut their multi-billion-dollar investment.
So Lee and George weren't being paid in cash.
No, they were given large blocks of stock in this rival pharmaceutical company. Their motivation was pure, calculated greed to become instant millionaires by using their federal power to neutralize the competition. They risked their careers, their freedom, their commitment to the Republic, just for a stock portfolio.
And the suppression escalated from just bureaucracy to outright assassination, which provided net force with their first, albeit tainted, sample of the drug.
Yes, the victim was George Harris Ziegler, an actor nicknamed the Zeester. He was a rich, famous hammer customer known for bragging about his usage. General Howard and Agent Lee were on site for the raid.
And Ziegler surrendered.
He raised his hands in surrender, and Agent Brett Lee shot him dead. Lee immediately fabricated a defense story, claiming Ziegler came at him with a knife, but Howard knew instantly it was a cold-blooded execution.
The irony is just. This illegal killing, driven by corporate corruption, yielded the very evidence the legal system couldn't produce.
It did. Howard, despite his deep suspicion of Lee, moved quickly to secure the scene. Michaels received the first physical sample of Thor's hammer, an empty paper clip box that contained the remaining purple capsule. While the chain of evidence for prosecution was ruined by the assassination, Michaels and his team now had the physical proof needed to begin their own forensic analysis and truly understand the chemical composition they were fighting.
So this single act of betrayal, driven by greed, now confirmed to Michaels that the threat was not merely chemical. It was fundamentally political and corporate.
Yes.
Agent Lee's assassination of Ziegler then quickly triggered a very dangerous escalation. General Howard, who was the only one on site who suspected Lee, became the next target.
Howard recognized the danger immediately. He's a man who trusts training over instinct, citing his FBI surveillance instructor. Being prepared was not the same as being paranoid. When he detected a white neon tailing him, he used these careful, specific maneuvers to confirm the tail, realizing that he was not just being watched, he was being hunted.
And Howard was notoriously well prepared for any violent confrontation, thanks to a very specialized piece of personal military hardware he had with him.
He was. He was traveling with his EDM Arms precision rifle, a monstrous .50 caliber weapon he had acquired for testing. This is not a standard military rifle. This is a sniper weapon guaranteed 1 minute of angle 1 MOA accuracy at 1,000 meters.
And for our listeners, what does 1 MOA mean in practical terms?
It means that at 1,000 yards, the shots will land within a circle that is just under 10 inches wide. It is extreme, lethal precision, and this particular rifle was capable of even tighter groups.
That's a massive specialized weapon to have in your car. And he used his car as an immediate barricade.
He instantly leveraged his environment. He used the trunk of his car as a barricade and, demonstrating extreme caution, risked raising his head for half a second to draw and pinpoint the shooter's fire.
And the shooter was
Zachary George, the corrupt NSA agent, he fired first, hitting Howard's car.
Then Howard returned fire with overwhelming force.
He slammed the trunk lid and fired 2 shots from the 50 cal. The sound alone was weaponized. The first shot, taken too quickly, was deafening, even though he immediately inserted earplugs for the second. The second, more controlled shot was aimed for the engine block. It hit the front tire and shredded the engine compartment.
The car was disabled.
Immediately disabled, with coolant vapor streaming from the hood. This massive, unexpected return fire forced George to abandon his mission and flee, confirming that George was the corrupt NSA agent trying to eliminate Howard as a threat to their corporate suppression scheme.
So with George exposed and Howard alive, the focus shifted back entirely to the chemist, Drayne. And Jay Gridley leveraged his earlier discovery and a peculiar cultural reference to pinpoint the dealer's exact Malibu house.
The lead came from the victim, Ziegler, the assassinated actor. Jay cross-referenced Ziegler's filmography and found a 2004 film called Surf Days, which was described as an homage to early 1960s beach culture. Jay then managed to get an interview with Mae Jean Kent, MJ, one of the co-stars.
And MJ was apparently less concerned with providing helpful police information and more concerned with gossip and self-promotion.
She was described as remarkably vapid, yeah. She focused heavily on her co-star's foibles and the details of her own plastic surgery, but in the midst of all her chatter, she provided the key geographic detail. The film had been shot right there on the Malibu beach.
And Jay combined this film location information with property records.
He did. And the final piece of the digital puzzle was the name Projects, Inc.
Projects, Inc.
Jay zeroed in on a pale blue and white house owned by Projects, Inc., a Delaware corporation. This instantly connected back to the vanity license plate on the Mercedes convertible, driven by the surfer-looking man, which simply read Projects. This deliberate, almost lazy connection confirmed Bobby Drayne's operational address, leading to the final confrontation.
But despite Drayne's elaborate operational security and meticulous planning, he received a warning that came from the most painful and unexpected source imaginable.
His own father, Robert Drayne, the retired FBI special agent in charge, called him just moments before the raid. Bobby had just had a tense meeting with the older man where his father revealed he knew the whole Polychem Products facade was fake.
He knew.
And Drayne's father, realizing his son was cornered, called him on his business line and delivered this cryptic, stark warning. If you have a lawyer, call him.
That is such a powerful moment. The decades of commitment to duty overriding years of hatred, balanced by one final moment of paternal instinct.
His father had turned him in to the Bureau to force him to face justice, but then, in the same breath, he warned him to run. Drayne understood immediately. That warning allowed him to escape the initial net led by FBI SAC Delorme.
He escaped with his crew.
He fled in a Dodge, accompanied by his loyal doper Tad Bershaw and his bodyguard, Adam.
And Drayne's ruthlessness came to the fore almost immediately during that escape.
Mid-chase, Drayne executed Adam. He shot him twice. His justification was just cold and efficient. Adam knew where the safe house was and was therefore an unacceptable liability to his estate plan. It was the action of a true sociopath chemist.
The chase ended when General Howard, coordinating from a net force helicopter, forced the car to a stop, leading to the final violent confrontation on the ground.
Yes, and the final shooter attempting to eliminate Drayne's captors and ensure his silence was none other than Zachary George, the corrupt NSA agent, attempting one last desperate move to secure the corporate objective. George was subsequently shot and killed by net force troops.
But the chaos provided cover for the ultimate, final twist regarding the identity of the person found dead at the scene.
It did. The authorities initially identified the dead man as the drug dealer, Bobby Drayne.
And that was correct.
That identification was correct, but the killer was his own partner, Tad Bershaw. Drayne, ever calculating, had planned to use Tad's body to frame him and facilitate his own escape. He even gave Tad a gun to fire wildly to create a distraction.
But Tad acted first.
Tad, perhaps realizing the setup or simply seizing the moment of chaos, acted first. He killed Drayne, framed his creator, and escaped with a critical commodity: a double dose of Thor's hammer and the remaining cash. Tad fled, determined to track down the man he saw on TV who orchestrated the raid, Commander Alex Michaels.
So Tad Bershaw's escape, armed with what the sources describe as a crippling triple dose of Thor's hammer, brought the entire chemical conflict to the Michaels home in Washington, D.C., setting the stage for the final brutal confrontation.
Tad, driven by revenge and infused with the maximum chemical power, tracked Michaels to his D.C. condo. He announced his arrival in a shocking display of superhuman strength, kicking down the reinforced side door, tearing the lock and hinges right from the frame. A feat that would be physically impossible for his naturally frail body.
And Toni, 5 months pregnant and grounded by her doctor's orders, was alone. But she had already prepared herself mentally.
She had. She had previously found one of those distinctive purple capsules in Alex's suit pocket and suspected the danger he was facing was imminent. When Tad arrived, she was forced into this terrifying performance of fear while the NetForce surveillance team listened in, concerned for her safety. But Toni used a subtle, coded warning to communicate her readiness and the extent of the threat.
She used her forced inactivity against the surveillance team's expectations.
Exactly. When a surveillance officer called to check on her, Toni claimed she was fine, but then casually mentioned she had been working out, doing her aerobics, and had turned off the phone to take a bath.
And Michaels heard this.
Michaels, flying back from LA, heard the debriefing and instantly felt a shard of icy steel stabbed deep into his bowels. He knew Dr. Flord had strictly forbidden any strenuous exercise, especially her jurist practice, the intense, structured movements of her Pentjack Sellet training due to the risk of preterm birth.
So her mention of aerobics.
It was a clear coded signal to him. The threat was inside, and she was preparing to fight to the death.
So when Michaels finally crashes the scene, the situation is already horrific. Tad, high on the hammer, was attempting to sexually assault Toni, having ripped her robe apart.
Michaels had to act with instant decisiveness, but he had an internal choice to make first. It was whether or not to take the hammer capsule he had secured. He refused. He reasoned that his best tool was his mind, and risking the drug-induced invincibility delusion was just too high a price. He chose to rely entirely on the core discipline of his martial arts training.
And Toni was prepared for this inevitability, too. She had a weapon.
She was. While Michaels provided the distraction, Toni grabbed the only available weapon. Her ceremonial Javanese kris, the wavy-bladed dagger gifted to her by her guru. It was designed for ceremony, not combat, but it was all she had.
And Michaels engaged with the weapon he always carried for protection, the karambit.
The karambit, yes. It's a small, curved claw knife, typically held by placing a finger through a ring in the handle. Michaels had the karambit hidden in his hand, relying on the low, grounded, internal energy movements of his Silat Sarak training to counter Tad's raw, chemically enhanced brute force.
The fight was short, brutal, and costly for everyone.
It was. Tad, with the speed and power of the hammer, managed to inflict a severe injury, driving the kris through Michaels' forearm, nearly cleaving his hand off. But Michaels, using his silent discipline, collapsed and lashed out, taking advantage of Tad's chemically driven arrogance. He landed a fatal slash across Tad's carotid artery with the karambit, winning the fight through pure skill and surprise.
But Tad wasn't down yet.
No, he was still moving, fueled by that triple dose, but rapidly bleeding out and slowing down. Before he finally collapsed, Tad managed to land one final kick that broke Michaels' ribs, just demonstrating the sheer, dangerous cost of fighting a chemically enhanced man.
The trauma of that entire operation, the Ziegler assassination, George's attempted execution of Howard, and the brutal fight in the Michaels condo, it forced a permanent reassessment of priorities among the NetForce command.
It did. General Howard, already shaken by George's death and his own near-death confrontation with the .50 caliber rifle and that white neon incident, he decided to retire. He explicitly stated that life is too short. He chose to prioritize his family, ensuring he would be present and healthy for his son's high school and college graduations. A realization that the risks associated with the job were no longer worth the cost.
And Jay Gridley, the genius who cracked the Norse code, he also found a new balance in his life, one that required less zen and more active engagement.
He and Saji are getting married, planning a honeymoon in Bali. Jay realized that his constant, intense meditation actually made him too mellow, dulling the necessary edge required to hunt the most sophisticated digital criminals. He needed to keep his howler monkeys intellectually busy. He understood that knowledge and application require energy and focused sharpness, not just quiet contemplation.
And for Alex and Toni Michaels, recovering from the violence, the resolution centered on a commitment to presence. They confirmed they are expecting a son.
The danger forced Alex to realize he could not continue operating at the same high-risk level. He chooses to scale back, focusing on repair work, specifically fixing the terrible damage Tad inflicted on his classic '55 Bel Air convertible.
That convertible.
The convertible, a symbol of domesticity and stability, becomes his priority over the field operations. His final reflection really reinforces the entire theme of this deep dive. He won the fight because he relied on core discipline, silent juris, and ethical clarity, specifically refusing to take the hammer capsule. And that contrasted directly with the chemical dependency and greed that destroyed all the villains.
The story ends not with a technological triumph, but an ethical one. The pursuit of power destroys the pursuer.
It's the ultimate synthesis. Michaels, the technically proficient commander, triumphed when he relied on his disciplined fighting style and moral restraint. The villains, the brilliant Drayne and the corrupt agents Lee and George, were utterly undone by their own hubris and the pursuit of power and profit.
So what does this all mean? We've covered the incredible, terrifying potential of an unregulated designer drug like Thor's hammer. We've talked about the intricate web of corporate and government corruption that drove highly trained federal agents to betrayal and assassination. And the final personal cost paid by the heroes who had to rely on discipline, not chemical enhancement, to win.
The central insight is undeniable. The most dangerous weapon wasn't the chemical formula itself, but the human desire to exploit it for profit. This high-stakes conflict, which destroyed 2 federal careers and led to multiple deaths, was engineered solely to suppress a superior product in a corporate market share battle.
That raises an important question for you, the listener, to mull over. The discovery of a compound like Thor's hammer instantly makes conventional warfare strategies obsolete, granting this overwhelming temporary power to the individual. If the pursuit of such chemical dominance, even a flawed version, can corrupt and destroy the highest levels of government and intelligence agencies, as we saw with the NSA and DEA agents, who is left to police the next generation of super enhancements? And what is the true global price society pays for that kind of uncontrolled power?